purpose of interim topics. And to that extent, I guess we'd ask the department to come up and talk about their interim topics if they'd like. Give you the opportunity. There's nobody from the governor's office, is there? Oh, you just will come up too if you'd like. And right. Michelle, why don't you start us off, please? And don't forget to say your name because we're going to make sure we get it all recorded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Lachelle Brandt, Governor Gordon's Education Policy Advisor. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go into the specific topics that we're interested in?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you would just expound on it and that way people can ask you questions as we get along. And
Absolutely.
Committee, just for your information, please feel free to interrupt. When the question hits you, we'll try to get it out there so that we can get it answered right away. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I bring the topic of early childhood special education funding finance to you today and ask for you to consider it as one of your priorities in the interim. As you are well aware through conversations through the interim, early childhood education services are provided by child development centers around Wyoming. And currently, all of the CDCs receive the same per child funding, which is set by statute. And then December 1st of each year, they count the number of children they serve, and that determines their reimbursement. Because the statutory funding has been inadequate, every 2 years, the legislature is called upon to provide supplemental funding. Some members on this committee may recall that in 2020, the state organized an early childhood governance task force to study fragmentation of early childhood system in Wyoming at the state level. And this system has been repeatedly rated least efficient in the country by the Bipartisan Policy Center. And that task force that was stood up brought forward recommendations for proposed changes to the state level oversight of early childhood programs to better serve children and families. That bill was not passed out of committee, and some of the pushback at the time was really related to the funding and the manner in which our child development centers are funded. So in 2022, the governor's Early Childhood Advisory Committee went to work on addressing funding concerns. A special education financing working group developed recommendations for improving Wyoming's approach to early childhood special education funding. And that working group included representatives from the Department of Education, the Department of Health, child development centers, and school districts. And the recommendation that evolved from that work group was to create a true funding formula for early childhood special education, one that would measure the actual number of children served and the real cost of providing those services. This structure would reduce the burden on the legislature and allow the child development centers to operate more effectively. The results of the finance working group were presented to the committee, this committee in August of 2023. And then late in 2023, the state established an early childhood special education funding formula work group to study and propose a new funding formula. That work group expects to have a formula and recommendations completed by this summer in 24, and those findings could be presented to this committee if this committee so desires. So that would be the first interim topic that the governor would like to recommend. The next one would be that the governor would like to support a study through the interim regarding our charter school statutes. From the time the statute was amended in 2021, we've tried to put baling wire around the array of issues and perhaps unintended consequences that resulted from some of the changes. The governor believes a comprehensive look at the law as it exists, the local impacts, financial impacts, benefits and challenges of the changes that were made 3 years ago before making further changes is prudent and necessary to ensure that the students in these charter schools have the same support and opportunities as students enrolled in the rest of our public schools. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, I believe you all received a letter from Wyoming's Future of Learning Partnership just requesting time on the committee's agenda in August for us to share some of the exciting work that is happening in the 9 pilot districts underneath Wyoming's Future of Learning Partnership and the RIDE pilots that are currently happening. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Anybody on the committee have a member or have a question? Go ahead. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being new to this committee still, maybe I don't understand how everything works, so just forgive if it's a dumb question, but why is this coming through the governor's office instead of the state superintendent of public instruction?
Go ahead, Lachelle.
Are you referring to all 3 topics or just?
Yes, I mean, I wasn't aware that the governor was quite as involved in policy regarding education as the state superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, I believe over past several years, it's really been a partnership regarding the special education finance working group. As I mentioned earlier, those conversations have included the Department of Education. Those conversations do involve programs that sit within the governor's cabinet and the Department of Health. So those are conversations that have been ongoing and definitely include the superintendent in those conversations. Prior to bringing this interim topic to you, there were conversations with the Department of Education about this topic and wanting it to be a priority. As far as the charter school recommendations, I believe, as you're well aware, the governor has members that sit on the charter authorizing board and is therefore very interested in the charter schools and overall just ensuring that our education system in Wyoming is the best that it can be.
Go ahead, Chairman Scott.
I would just comment that since education really is the most important thing that Wyoming state and local government does, it's not unreasonable for the chief executive officer, the governor, to have opinions on education. I'm glad to see him working with the state superintendent, State Department of Education, which has a special charge in that area. But I am glad to see the governor's office participating and glad to see them working with the State Department.
Further questions for Lachelle? Do you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I'm really glad to see the charter school portion. You know, apparently, as you see, we had a couple bills changing things around again. So it'll be good to get a comprehensive look at how charter schools are working and how we maybe can get ahead of the next hole that we find.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? Thank you again. All right, Vicki, we'll move on to the superintendent and her.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Dickie Shaner here on behalf of State Superintendent Dagenfelder. We have 3 items to speak to you about today. The first was just mentioned by Lachelle from the governor's office. As part of the larger Future of Learning Partnership, the state superintendent joined in that letter requesting time on the August agenda to just provide an update. It wasn't an interim topic request, just a request to have some time on the agenda to speak, and the superintendent supports that effort. When it comes to the 2 interim topics coming from the state superintendent, we have one related to CTE and one related to literacy. And at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have our Chief Academic Officer, Shelley Hamill, speak to you about the literacy interim topic.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members. Shelley Hamill with the Wyoming Department of Education. The proposed topic around literacy is really a request for support for ongoing literacy efforts. I'd like to take just a moment to thank Representatives Yin and Brown for their interest in supporting this topic. That's really a 2-part ask. So first, I think you're all very familiar with the work around Wyoming Statute 21-3401, which is our literacy statute, reading assessment and intervention program, where the last few years has been quite a heavy lift implementing new rules and supports both in professional development, documents, et cetera, for the success of districts' implementation of those most recent changes and the rules. And then secondly, the second part of this interim topic would be support for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which some of you might be familiar with. It's a book gift-giving program where all children birth through ages 5 receive free books monthly. We're looking at the positive impact of that program addressing oral language and vocabulary expansion, which we believe will very much support increased and improved literacy as those children enter the school system. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions, anybody? Nothing, go ahead.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the next interim topic from Superintendent Degenfelder, I would like our Chief Policy Officer, Wanda Maloney, to share.
Good afternoon, Chairman Northrup and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking on behalf of the superintendent. The topic that I'd like to bring forward to you is a holistic view of career and technical education. And I want to thank Chairman Northrup for sponsoring the bill or the interim request, and then also Representative Lawley. As we looked at this topic, there were several things that became apparent to us. We have a demonstration grant, and that is through state funds. We also have an equipment grant. And we just looked at what can we do as a department to create efficiencies to further support the work around career and technical education, recognizing that there is a tremendous impact on our students, our staff, our districts, our post-secondary institutions, and then also looking at some of our technical student organizations. And we really want to ensure that we can look for efficiencies. Recently, we started to look at our Perkins 5 funding at the federal level, and we've drafted a new plan for that. And one of the things the superintendent has been very proud of is the fact that she's looking for efficiencies, things that we can do to support our districts as we move forward in that. And so as we drafted that plan, we looked for opportunities to work with districts and our stakeholders to make it more user-friendly. We also looked at the model funding for additional CTE teachers, and we would ask that this committee continue to consider that, to look at, is that still something that meets the needs of our districts? Another area would be around staff costs of CTE teachers, looking at the just the training that it takes to bring a CTE teacher, making sure that we have a correct number of teachers that are licensed and ready to support. And then finally, we're looking for pathways to recruit more teachers into the field of CTE. So those are just a few of the areas that we'd like to have under discussion for this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney. I have been told many times that CTE instructors are going to be hard to find in the future, so as they're aging out. So it's something we need to continue to work on. Go ahead, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Maloney, for being here. And quick question, as the superintendent, has she been invited or been traveling the state to observe any of these CTE programs that our districts are offering? In particular, even my area in Evanston, I think we do a pretty good job.
Go ahead, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, Chairman Northrup and Representative Berger. The superintendent certainly has been around the state and is supportive and into classrooms. I can't specifically speak to which programs that she has seen, but she is an advocate, and this is something that she specifically addressed in her strategic plan, and it is definitely a priority.
Further questions for Ms. Maloney? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Chairman?
WD. Yes,
guess
go ahead,
before we go-
Representative Brown.
And this probably more associated with the state board, but one of the topics that we've had brought forward, and I believe it was Chairman Scott actually brought it forward, is we talked about it last year and even the year before slightly about the reduction in standards. Can you guys just give us an update on where the board is at and what that looks like? I imagine that's probably a pretty serious consideration, especially if we were told, hey, give us some time, we'll fix it. We've given some time, we'd like to know where we're at with that.
Go ahead, Chief Maloney.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Brown, thank you for that question. So the state board is working hand in hand with the department, and we have audited several, I think that's 6 content areas, and there has been a reduction of almost 69%. So, I mean, pretty exciting when you look at the number of standards, and this has been in math, science. Gosh, I'm gonna not be able to rattle them all off, but I know it's 6 content areas. And so we're excited to see that moving forward. Currently, Chapter 10 is out for public comment, and we are getting reactions to that and mostly favorable reactions to the reductions.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that, the state board submits its annual report on the review of the standards, and we'll send that out. I think it was sent sometime in December, but we'll email that back out to the committee so you have a understanding. I believe Mrs. Maloney indicated the reduction is pretty significant.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ms. Maloney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dickie. All right, who would like to go next? Go ahead, Mr. Winnie. There's 2 more chairs, so if somebody else would like to come up and fill them up, please do.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. On the heels of some of the things I've just heard, I'd like to offer you a couple thoughts. Some of you may have heard me say this. I've been in a mixed marriage for some 50 years now. My wife is not a very good reader, and I'm a voracious reader. In the idle moments, as I observed the Senate this morning, I read a nice article on redwood trees. It's nice having the computer in your lap. But my point would be, if you're serious about literacy, and we've heard that mentioned a couple times already, I believe you need to put a reading instructional facilitator in every school. Well, I recognize some schools are so small you're going to have to do some time sharing, so I got that. But further, you should fund them in toto by the state so that they're not subject to bureaucratic moving of money, salary, health insurance, those kind of things. Then, as you talk about pathways to recruit more teachers, I'd ask you all to look at where your heart is. Is it in the classroom? Or is it in administration and bank accounts? I think you need to look at teacher salaries, and I think you need to talk about increasing them, and I think that will get you where you want to go. But the bottom line is, look at where your heart is. It needs to be in the classroom first. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. As you know, classrooms first and foremost, and so that's where we try to make our biggest impression with our dollars.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Erin Taylor. I represent the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees, and you'll see on your list that we did submit one topic for you, and that has to do with the statewide longitudinal education data system, or affectionately we call it SLEDS. It's something that maybe you guys have talked about, maybe it's more talked about in the Appropriations Committee, but just to give you a little bit of history, lots of states have a SLEDS. Many of them don't say education in it. It's statewide longitudinal data systems. It's something that's used to collect data from the entire spectrum, from as children come up through the education system and on into the workforce. Ours is finally working now. It moved into the Community College Commission as their state agency to stand it up a few years ago, and they did that work. They got it up and running. There's a federal grant that's been given to fund the working of the SLEDS right now. We're talking about, there's some dollars in the budget to incorporate that early childhood data into this data set. It's not quite yet under the commission. It's still in the Department of Family Services. But where I'm going with this is we need to continue this work. I think it's a great tool that our state can utilize as we look at the gaps. We always talk about that. Where are the gaps? How do we figure out how our education system is meeting the needs of our workforce. And this is a data solution that can help us get there. The long-term funding is really something that I think is important for the committee to look at once those federal grants run out. Where is the state's commitment or obligation, however you want to look at it, to continue that data to be working? Is it staffed adequately right now? And this is my own opinion, but there aren't dedicated people in the commission to do that work. So I would submit to you, maybe the state needs to hire some data analysts. In other states, it's housed in other areas. Maybe it's its own agency within, or program within an agency. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe it's housed somewhere else. So there are some examples. I know other states have some well stood up and maybe more mature statewide longitudinal data systems that we can learn from. And so I just encourage you to consider this. If it's not in the education committee, I strongly encourage it to be somewhere, just so the intent is there, again, to make sure that the work continues. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to offer any support as that moves forward. And of course, anything else that you might consider that involves the community colleges, we're here to provide the information that you would need.
Do you have a question? Go ahead. Chairman Scott.
Couple. This data system that you're talking about, is that correlating K-12 data with community college data and following the students through? Am I right in the understanding that's what you're talking about?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct on where we are right now.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, frankly, I think probably the committee needs at least one topic in the higher education area, Mr. Chairman. I was contacted by a member, the legislature is not a member of this committee, but in the leadership, and thinking we ought to take a look at the Hathaway and the results we're getting out of it, and what the students are actually doing with that, and how it's benefiting or not benefiting the state. Is that something that you guys would be supportive of, or is that not something we need to do at this time?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I can answer that question specifically. There might be some people behind me who could do that. But I think that's kind of why we're talking about it, is what kind of data do you want to see looked at, and where is it housed? How do we utilize it to make decisions? So I think that's part of the conversation.
Aaron, I think also part of the conversation is just getting it out there so that everybody starts to understand that the economic benefits that can be had by being able to find out how a student did when they were in high school, and then track them up and through the college and into careers, and be able to find out, you know, as a group of students, are we meeting their needs in education as they move into the career world? And so.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. You know, you heard from Ms. Brandt, the RIDE initiative, there's the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. We're doing so many things with partnering the K-12 with the higher education, including workforce. I just think this is another tool to help you make better decisions.
Thank you. Questions? Further questions? Thank you, Aaron. Please go ahead, Carrie.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Carrie Klein with the Wyoming Public Charter School Association. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that we welcome the work during the interim. We are more than happy and look forward to providing any resources and help as part of that conversation and support the effort. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. Any questions for Carrie? Anybody? Thank you, Carrie. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jessie Defoe with the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education, and we just really want to thank the Superintendent's Office for bringing forth that interim topic for your discussion. We feel that there's great momentum happening because of that highlight, and we know that ultimately we want to prepare a workforce. And to do that, you need a pipeline of educators. So to hear that that's one of the priorities is very encouraging to us. I'm happy to help however we can in terms of all of our educators are happy to dig into the grants too to see what is the most efficient way to share those funds with as many districts as possible. And there's just some good work that can be done. So we just want to thank you for considering it, and we're happy to be partners in finding solutions.
Well, speaking of partnerships, you're going to be working with community colleges pretty pretty well on that, so that'll be a good spot to have a partnership.
Very
Anybody have any
excited for that.
questions for Jesse?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman, members of the committee, I only just want to briefly speak in support of the Department of Education's request to take a look at the literacy programs as well as Ms. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, and just leave it at that. I speak in support of it and hope you'll consider it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Yin, any questions for the representative? Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, you do have Devin Brubaker online whenever you're ready for that.
We're ready, I guess. It looks like. If anybody would like to come up and while we're getting Devin into the room, please come up and fill the chairs. When Devin's ready.
You are in the room, Mr. Brubaker, so whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, appreciate the opportunity. My name is Devin Brubaker. I represent the Wyoming Airports Coalition. This is a new committee for us that we have not stood before, but we're pleased to have submitted an interim topic request in partnership with Representative Walters regarding aviation workforce development programs and CTE here in the state of Wyoming. The aviation industry faces a shortage of 30,000 pilots and as many as 48,000 aircraft mechanics. Unfortunately, states like Wyoming that are rural in nature are going to face the brunt of any damage caused by these shortages. It is our hope that this committee during the interim will take up the topic to evaluate opportunities for our community colleges, our high schools, and other educational programs in the state of Wyoming to be able to help facilitate the increase in aviation workforce development within the boundaries of Wyoming. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I know you have a lot on your schedule, so appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Devin. Does anybody on the committee have any questions for Devin? Comments? We'll be looking forward to working with you. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Anybody else online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
One more time. Anybody in the audience want to speak? Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. I've shared with you some of the ideas that we've had, but just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about a couple of them. Mr. Chairman, one of the suggestions that we have is that the committee get a couple of updates. Some of them you've already talked about, but the update on the standards work. The work of the State Board of Education has really been looking toward the future of education. With their profile of a graduate work, just getting the update on what's been done so far with regard to the profile of a graduate, what standards work has been done, and is there anything that they've discovered needs statutory change in order to open things up for school districts to provide flexibility for students in their learning. I know that the next area of discussion is now about the state assessment. And so the State Board of Education will be having that conversation around our assessment. If our assessment and our standards are not aligned, then it doesn't matter if we got rid of all of the standards because everybody's going to focus on that assessment. So that work of the State Board and really in coordination with the Governor's Office and the RIDE Initiative have been powerful toward thinking about the future of learning and the future opportunities for our students. To that end, I think it would also be beneficial to get a report on the future learning or the future ready schools, the initiatives that are underway now through the Governor's Office, the department, the State Board, that are looking at being innovative. How can we be innovative? And the districts that have initiated pilots and thinking about how do we remove barriers so that, again, we can focus on the best opportunities for our students. So I think those reports would be very informative to the committee. And ultimately, the question at the end of each of those is, does anything in statute need to change in order to enable the good things that are happening there? Mr. Chairman, one of the other areas that we would like for you to consider is this challenge that some of our small districts, really all of our districts, but it's acute in our small districts, face in hiring retired teachers. So sometimes when a teacher retires, it's in a hard-to-fill area. And so a vacancy occurs, but because of the state's rules for retirement, there has to be a 30-day separation for that person to be rehired by a district. And so because of the way contracts work, you have somebody who's probably done with school in late May or early June, but their contract carries them through until July or potentially even early August. And then the district can't go back to that teacher that was retired and say, hey, can you come back to the classroom for one more year? In doing so, there's either a penalty to the district, a financial penalty to the district, or to the teacher, or to both. And so if we could examine this, it would be beneficial to our smallest districts in filling those hard-to-fill areas. And I think that would be a helpful area. Mr. Chairman, one of the other suggestions that we had really relates to school safety, student safety. There have been a couple of issues around the state lately related to what I'll just generally call cyberbullying. For anything from sexting scandals to cyberbullying, and looking at are there ways that we can protect our students? Is there anything that we can learn from examination of those recent instances? But perhaps more so than that, there is a substance that is available in your convenience stores. Go down to Maverick, look for Kratom, Kratom, and some people call it drugstore heroin. It looks like a 5-hour energy drink, and kids are taking this, and it is not controlled by the FDA. Some states have begun to put regulations on this uncontrolled substance. It's easily accessible, readily available, and something that is quite dangerous, and students are aware of and sometimes abusing this uncontrolled substance. So fit that within that school safety and security topic as well. Mr. Chairman, those are a few ideas we'd ask for your consideration.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Questions for Brian? Comments? All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else going once? Twice? All right. We'll close public comment. Mr. Chairman.
My suggestion is, Mr. Chairman, we've got enough time to go right down the line and ask members for their priorities. We've obviously got more good things we could work on than we've got time, so we're going to have to set some priorities.
I agree. So we'll start down with Representative Andrew and work our way down. Hate to put you on the spot, but there you are. It's yours.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the curse of having a last name that begins with A, but I did submit a topic, and I submitted it very last minute, so I didn't write much on or about it on here. But I was interested in exploring the Y-top. I brought a bill on it this session with Senator Brennan, basically exploring the necessity of even having it. And I mean, that's kind of the most extreme ask. I realize that, and I think the School Boards Association even alluded to, what are we going to do after we reduce the standards? Does that get easier? Is that less of a burden? So exploring that more, that is the number one thing when I talk directly to teachers that they bring. That is one of the most difficult things they have to deal with, and one of the things they see as the most unnecessary. So I think we probably will be exploring that, but when we explore that, maybe we should also ask the question, do we need this at all?
Are you finished? Are you done? Okay. Go ahead, Representative Allred.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been taking a few notes and looking things over. There's We need everything here. But narrowing it down a little bit, I'm interested in anything to help kids learn to read better. And certainly our CTE programs. And the things that Mr. Farmer just related to us. So those would be my top three. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Clauston, please go ahead.
Thanks. I was looking for something as simple as the ESA subject, so what I was, mine in here deals with just trying to take away some of the things that were mentioned as far as rehiring former teachers. So just making sure that, we've done this with other professions in the state, and anything we can do to bring these teachers back without hurting them or the districts and getting them back to fill some needs. That was the goal of my topic.
Okay, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on the YTOP and assessments, I've been really thinking about the impact of chronic absenteeism and counting those scores or using their scores. And I'm not saying not let those kids take the YTOP or the ACT, they can, but when you report for your report card, a district report card, I mean, it's tough. If you take those kids that are missing, those chronic absenteeism kids, your scores go up pretty well. And I've been thinking about this as far as the workforce. If you're gone 50 days a year and you don't show up for work and you're not saying why you're not showing up to work, do you have a job? I mean, it's hard to teach kids who aren't there. It's that hard. And it's hard to even have their scores. It's difficult. When it comes to hiring teachers who are retired, I think that's a great topic. But we have hired teachers that are retired and come back. But they get control of their contract. And guess what? Those retired teachers get to say, I don't want to go to any staff development. I don't want any meetings, committee meetings. I won't be on any of that. I don't want bad kids in my room, so I don't want IEP kids, or I don't want at-risk kids. I just will teach this, and they're coming back, and they get to control their contract. What about the rest of us? Is that fair? Because now, if we want to hire retired teachers, I'm just like, I'm out of here. I'll retire, just like that. I'll come back and control my contract and say, even my wife, God bless her, she's an ELA teacher, but you want to talk about being meted out and being, held to the fire on assessment. Those are the teachers that are being held to the fire. Come see it. Her scores are really good with the chronic absentees. You take them off, those chronic absentees, and we've done it together. And now her scores from 75%, and this is with IEP kids, they go to 95% when we take those chronic absentees. And I know that's not a good score. We want 100, but I think 95 is not too bad. CTE, wonderful. Please come see I've asked the superintendent, I've asked everybody, come see what's going on in Evanston. We have a lot of teachers that are multi-certified in our area. It's very difficult to keep them, but they have amazing things going on. In Evanston, we have a working ranch in our school district with 60 acres, and they work it year round. And it's not just for ag kids. My son wasn't a rancher, and he went in that group. Now he's a project manager, but he uses those ag skills in his job right now here in Wyoming for Grow House. So yeah, early literacy, yes, I think that's wonderful. But one last thing, and I hope that we bring up something on this committee, is AI, the impact of AI in our classrooms and social media. we've got to do something. You know, and we keep saying, hey, I'm in control of my kids' phones, and yeah, you're in control of them, but you're not in control of the apps that you know that they're not on, or that you know that they're not on, yeah, because they're on those apps, and we see it all the time, and they're bullying each other, and it's just big. So, I mean, if we're gonna, I also put in pay for performance and things like that, that might consider those things, especially for those teachers in the areas that we're testing, like ELA, math, science. If we're teaching those, you know, if those teachers are performing, let's give them a stipend because we know they're doing extra. But anyways, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you, Representative Berger. Go ahead, Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Chairman. There's just a couple baseline issues that I think need to be on the agenda where I'm not sure is as important as that they are. We're the home base for community colleges, so I think all of the interim topics related to community colleges should be teased out of this, of our agenda here and the comments that have been made. But we need to hear from the community colleges on their topics. And the second one is following the line that Brian Farmer was discussing. We need to hear from the Board of Education on the profile of a graduate. I think these are two really important baseline topics for us.
Thank you, Representative Obermuller. Let's go to the other end of the table, and we'll start down with Representative Provenza.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was going to take a nap waiting, but I guess I can get started. I think, you know, one of the things that we keep coming back to in this committee, and I think has come up, but we don't have a solution for, is early childhood education. I don't think it's enough to just say, let's just let loose and have a bunch of pre-Ks. We need to do it thoughtfully. And I think that other states have looked at this. I think we've got a lot of really smart people in this state that can help us implement a program that works. So I'd like to start there. And I think it's a big lift. So we might, you know, if we're looking at something like early childhood, reducing the number of things that we're looking at so we can actually thoughtfully consider that would be important. Additionally, I wrote down the school psych issue, making sure that we have psychologists in our schools. We made mental health our number one priority last interim, and then we didn't do anything with it. So I think we still, I don't want to just let that go by the wayside. Clearly, we have a problem, and we need to kind of figure out what can we do to help solve that problem. So that was my second priority. I also want to support state literacy support, so the Imagination program, and looking at how can we set students up for success as we talk about pre-K, but also what other literacy issues can we help with. And then the last thing that I mentioned is the standards reduction. I think we should talk about that thoughtfully as well. I think we've overburdened our teachers, and we've heard that repeatedly. We've overburdened our students, but we also can't just fly the other way and completely deregulate what we want to teach our kids. We need to make sure we still provide an excellent quality education, which we do right now. But how can we do so without inflicting harm and making school something that puts a lot of stress on our students? So those are my four main topics. And I mean, I think those are big bites to take out of apples. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Provenza. Representative Brown, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should be no surprise, I'll stick with the K-3 reading, making sure we have early childhood literacy. I co-sponsored that one to bring that in through here. One that I do think is an interesting topic, and you'll see my name attached to it, was the school psych. Met with the association that deals with school psychologists across the state. And this actually branches not just the K through 12, but it's a larger ranging discussion that would actually go into the university as well, you know, and PTSB and what the future look for school psychs is actually going to be. And so I think I think it would behoove us to be ahead of that curve as opposed to trying to play catch up. Kind of give you a quick breakdown of it. You've got a certification that is probably going to be the status quo. The state of Wyoming does not have a program, a doctorate or we'll call it upper level program that would qualify for this particular certification. So we would have to be searching outside our state for these school psychs to be able to fill our school psychologist positions within within our state. That's not something I want to do. I'd like to be able to grow our own. And if we have the availability to do that at the university, we should be working hand in hand with our K through 12 partners as well as our university to get a program stood up and make sure that it fits what Wyoming needs. So I'm pretty passionate about that one. And then the last one that I have is determining whether or not we actually want to see pre-K. I think we have some indications that pre-K would be good, but I also think that there's some refutable evidence that shows that pre-K may not be as good as what it is. I think this committee needs to take a deep dive into that and determine whether or not that's where we want to go, if we want to put that in a budget, and whether we want to have that long-range discussion. I think it's pretty clear that the body is divided on it, but I think if we get more of the facts, we can have a better educated decision. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Senator Brennan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Northrup. I guess I would like us to look at kind of the idea of how much pressure we're putting on students and teachers and what we can do to return that joy to teaching and learning in the classroom.
Thank you, Senator Brennan. Go ahead, Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My priorities, I have 4. The top priority obviously is educational savings accounts. Depending on what happens with the bill that's going through, we may need to tweak it. If it passes, if it doesn't pass, I would like to see a committee bill that we can all get behind. I think it's easier to pass committee bills in such a divided legislature right now. And I think the committee bill process would be the way to go to get that done. And then also make sure that we're protecting homeschoolers. We heard a lot of debate on that, at least on the Senate side. Make sure that the homeschoolers are protected adequately as we transition into the new world of ESAs. Second would be school capital construction and the broken process that we currently are involved in. I would like to see discussion on the proposed constitutional amendment that Co-Chairman Scott brought. I think that's a brilliant idea to fix this problem. It would allow communities like Rock Springs to build their school bonded out to avoid the legislative gridlock that we see, people jumping over other people in line. I think it's the most fair process to go with the equalization language that he had in that bill. I thought was spot on, and I think that's something we should explore. Third, I would like to discuss reading performance. Reading and is huge. We heard it from people testifying today. We've got to keep working on the reading front. And then fourth would be the assessment and standards discussion. Absolutely needs to happen, whether it's talking about the effectiveness of the YTOP, the stress it puts on the teachers and the students, our whole assessment regime in general needs to be looked at, and our content standards and what we're doing with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Senator Beitman. Go ahead, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My number 1 would be educational choice as well. Second would be improving performance in teaching, reading, and early grades. Third would be school capital construction and Senator Scott's bill, SJ 5. Third, excessive regulation interfering with classroom teaching. And then 5th would be the preschool for students with disabilities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You talk faster than I could write, so just give me a second to get caught up. That's good. Senator, Chairman Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pass the ball a little bit to you. What I'm going to try to do is come with see if I can give us a draft consensus proposal based on what we've heard. You want us to say anything before we try that?
I'd like to see what my priorities are, and I think you and I need to get together and coalesce this into something. But one thing that's happening as we work with charter schools and ESA program, we're having students that move out of the K-12 facilities, and as they do that, those students then turn into a dropout. And so I'd like to look at if we can do anything with that, because of course that hurts K-12 schools, that dropout, and then their graduation rates are also affected. So I believe that as those students are moving out of public school and into especially an ESSA environment, not necessarily charter schools, but definitely an ESSA environment, that there's a negative effect back to K-12 just in those two. Another one, of course, is the CTE. My notes are like certified teachers coming out of industry, making that process a little easier. And that's PTSB, I understand, but we also need to talk about what we expect as far as education requirements, and that's probably more PTSB. Willing to work with community colleges on all points. And also, I think when we start talking about safety and security, we're going to have a new item that entered into that, and that's guns in schools. And so that comes back, and we're going to be talking community colleges. We're going to be talking to the University of Wyoming plus K-12 about this new event that's going to be happening in guns in schools and how that's going to affect all the educational. And of course, the last one that I really feel passionate about is the social media plague that we have right now. And kids are way too involved with what's going on social media and compared to the rest of us. So those are mine, Senator.
Okay. Let me see if I can sort of distill a consensus. I'm hearing almost universally that early literacy, one way or another, is something we need to continue on. Number of bullet points under that. Look at the innards of the Y-top, how that works. Look at the various obstacles to early literacy. There's the impact of chronic absenteeism that might well fit in that, because that is a real issue there. The business of trying to reduce the regulation in the classroom so that the joy of teaching and the joy of learning gets back and emphasized. And I'm not as articulate as I should be about how we get there and what we're trying to do, but I hear that as an undertone in several of the conversations.
And Senator Scott, I would echo that also, because I think we're getting to where we teach to the Y-top test, and we're not worried about so much the big picture of education. So Y-top's starting to drive education, and maybe we can do something with that. It'd be nice to explore that.
But you've got the converse of that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that's a truism, and it is true. So I think there's issues there we've got to look at. The question about rehiring retired teachers fits under that, fits under CTE, and fits under those several things. I'm hearing a lot of talk about the preschool, both in preschool for the ordinary child and preschool for the developmentally disabled that the CDCs run. I think you've got to make clear we need to make clear to the Management Council, we're looking at both. And I think there's a good deal of question, and we heard it down here, as to exactly what do you do in an early childhood program that will benefit the teaching of reading later on. I think the early childhood is a separate topic from the reading, but it clearly feeds into that. And one of the suggestions I would make, Mr. Chairman, is we see if we can get back 4 years ago. This committee heard from an expert that was doing research on how children learn with using fMRI technology. And he was interesting on the early literacy and the value of preschool. And there's been quite a bit of time passed, and I think they've probably learned something more. I think that would be very informative, Mr. Chairman, if we can afford it, figure out how to do it. I'm hearing quite a bit about CTE. I think that needs to be one of our topics. And there's very specifics, how it coordinates with the community colleges. How do we get the teachers? The hiring back retired teachers fits as a bullet point under that. You've got a number on this sheet. How do we staff them and that sort of thing? There's a broad topic there, Mr. Chairman. School capital construction, the Senate is interested in that. And, you know, with the disappearance of the funding source, we got a problem. I'm getting real concerned it's going to compete with the operating side. And that we've had chronic problems. The Senate has heard quite a bit about chronic problems with not following the process and political jumping of priorities there. And so there's a series of issues, and we do have a proposed solution, but I keep hoping somebody else will come up with some other ones that might be better. So that's a possibility, Mr. Chairman. And then we need to do something in higher education. The data system that the college suggested to us is certainly a good starting point, and it melds the two together. Open to other suggestions, but we need to do something there, Mr. Chairman. What have I missed? Because we got to set some priorities.
Board of Education.
That was the only one we missed, was the Board of Education trying to reduce the number of trustees. And I think that's just
And hear about the profile of the graduate.
yep.
Yeah,
And the profile of a graduate, we need to have that in there.
yeah.
Okay. Well, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think that profile of a graduate would really go well under the CTE stuff and looking at different, how we call it would be different graduation paths, graduation requirements. There's a different path for, might be a CTE path, there's a Hathaway path, there's, that profile, what does it look to help individuals? That's just a
How
suggestion.
the profile of the graduate fits in the CTE. Good bullet point, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss, you have anything you want to add? Okay, anybody just want to have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the committee, are you all willing to have the chairman and I take that as a basis and put together something? We'll try to get a lot of the things you talked about as bullet points, because you have to be careful about going to management council with too many.
We were a little dinged on having too many last time, so I'd like to reduce it by one if we can. Okay. Okay. One last time, I'll give the audience a chance. Anything you'd like to bring forth? None appearing, then we will be adjourned.